This chess game is a must win. Welcome to my Game 8 analysis of my chess tournament in Sevilla, Spain. I'm currently at 4 out of 7 with a couple of negative results in the past rounds. Need a redemption on round 8 to finish up this tournament quite smoothly. My opponent was rated 1755 from Morocco, the first opponent of mine over the board that I play that's from Africa, fun fact. My opponent goes with d4, and I smell the rat. If you know the movie reference, comment down below. After knight f3, I said to myself, oh no, I'm falling into a London system. And now I have to play really well, because the London system is a very solid opening that chess players play that is pretty much automatic for them, and the black pieces have to play very nicely. I go e6 here, and after bishop f4, I go bishop d6. My plan is to directly neutralize this bishop on f4 with the trade-off of this strong bishop that is now cast outside of the pawn structure for better usage. So after bishop d3, I play knight f6. I don't want to trade now because after takes, it opens up the rook on this h-file, and I kind of want to wait until I get a better trade going. So I go development e3 by my opponent, and now I go with this interesting b6. You see, my bishop here is quite stale on b7, so I want to develop my bishop on b7 where it can support this e4 square for long-term knight e4 things. Bishop b5 check really surprised me from my opponent. Usually you don't give a check if I can respond with c6 and just kick your bishop and you've given me a free move. So now bishop d3, and you could have played bishop d3, I play c6, and etc. But I think it's kind of a good time waster because now I usually want to play c5 in this position. So you've actually wasted the time on my end as well, and I will have to give out another move to play c5 here, which is quite interesting. And so in this position, I try to use my opening of the b pawn to my strength. You see, there is an option to go bishop b7, as I mentioned, but now I come up with bishop a6. So not only am I neutralizing this bishop, I'm also trading off this essential, super nice light square bishop in the London. And my opponent is pretty much obliged to take. I mean, unless you want to give a pawn, you can't negate this trade. So bishop takes, and I take with the knight pretty quick, and now queen e2. And here this was a toss-up. Where do I put my knight after queen e2 attacking my knight? I really didn't know. Knight c7, I didn't see a big future, so eventually I just go knight b8. I just go back, and I want to go knight b7, knight bd7 eventually, not giving a bishop in this position, but I want to go knight bd7, and my knight can support these e5 or c5s in the future. My opponent goes knight bd2, and now is the time that I play a small inaccuracy. I run out of patience, if you will. Knight bd2 tells me that my opponent is castling long. I've been waiting for castle short so I can trade off this bishop now, and now you don't have this open file for your rook. But if you're castling long with knight bd2, it means that no matter when I take this bishop, I'm opening up the h-file. Here, though, it is still good to be patient and wait with castles short, but I take on g3, opening my opponent's file on me. So a bit of an impatient take here. And now I go with h6. So this is the plan, quite blocking it out, but my opponent always has some little resources with g4 if they can muster it up, and g5, which seems really nice, going on this pinned pawn. So knight e5 is played here, and now I go knight fd7 after a very long turn. Knight fd7 just ensures that I defend this pawn continuously with my knight, and I try to trade off these knights. Now my opponent defends their knight with knight bf3, and I go with c5 here after so much time of thinking. So the idea is that if you take, I can take back, and then you can go g4, but then I can go like queen f6, and on g5 I can go queen g6. And here I'm still holding. If you take, I'm like, okay, and against this plan it's fine. On f5 though, my opponent played g4 anyways, without trading on d7 and just threatening this push of g5. But now I have takes, and I had prepared this really crazy move. Crazy line, okay? Call me Karpov, because after knight d7, I am preparing to move my king in the center. In this position, if you take my knight, and I play queen takes, I'm giving away this g5 square, and now white's plan is simple. Just g5 and taking on h6, creating a weak isolated pawn on this square. And that's essentially just a weakness that I have, and my opponent doesn't have weaknesses, and I can't let that go at 1755. So in this position, after takes, I had prepared king takes. And now if you play queen b5 check, now I'm gonna go king d6. Defending this pawn here, and I assessed that this was okay. But let me just be very clear. This is very stressful to go through when playing against a 1700 where there's a lot of rating on the line. I have a lot to lose in this position in which I have a king on d6. This would have been a quite crazy line if you can confirm or agree. So I go, this did happen? Oh, this did happen, that's right. This did happen. My opponent though doesn't go queen b5 check, which I was assured that this is the best move. It forces me to go up to d6 because after takes I'm defending my pawn, but no, my opponent plays castled here. And I was very, very relieved on this move. You see, when your opponent's king is in the center, let's flip the board real quick. I never do this, but when your opponent's king is in the center, your plan is to open up the center as much as possible, put some rooks on this, and just put some fireworks on the board. By playing the move castles, my opponent is a bit slow to accomplish this, and this lets me close the center with c4. And now you don't have queen b5 check. You don't have the opening of the d file with d takes c5. And what does the white pieces play? c3 is played here, and here I was even more happy. I was thinking maybe b3. I was thinking, you know, engine is saying rook h5, which is crazy. Maybe e4 I was thinking about, but c3 makes me feel that my opponent's a little scared here. So I actually go with b5, and I'm starting a queenside attack on my opponent's king while my king is in the center. e4 is played now finally to open up the center, but after king c6, a little inaccuracy says the engine, but after king e6, believe it or not, my king is quite comfortable here on the c6 square. After you take here, I take, and it's actually small advantage for the black pieces, surprisingly. And what do you do here? How do you monopolize? Like rook here, I can go rook e8 and seize and control the file, neutralize your file. It's quite interesting. So my opponent goes with f4, and now my opponent is launching this rocket into outer space against my king, against my position. I think my opponent's plan is very simple. My opponent wants to blow up the center in my face, blow up the position in my face, and the more lines that are open, the more this king is vulnerable. I want to do the same except on the queen side, so I go with a5. Very reasonable, very logical, want to open up these lines. I want to go b4 and I want to take on c3. I want to follow that up with queen d6 and then queen a3 stuff. Queen c2. And now I go queen d6, attacking this pawn. And after g3, which I was like, first of all, I didn't like this move. This is the only move of the game I probably did not like. Just by principle, I think it's just, this rook is doing not anything here. It's not opening the file. So you can just go rook df1, defend this pawn, and just support it for f5. And I felt like this helped the white pieces against me. But now g3, I was so happy. And here, this pawn is quite pinned actually. On f5 things, I can take, and if you want to defend your pawn first, you're losing a time, a tempo, a move to then play f5, and this just gives me so much more time to launch my queenside attack on your king. And here I go with the very ambitious rook hb8. Like now I'm declaring war. This is an official declaration of war on this king, that I'm going full out attack with my rooks, my pawns, both my rooks supporting both my pawns. It's getting wild up in here. My opponent played a very nice move in my opinion, which was rook h5. I completely missed this. This is a rook assault on the vertical of the board. No, on the horizontal of the board, sorry. It's a horizontal assault that's looking to, it's looking to attack this d5 pawn. And actually this rook can transfer very easily to open files on e5. It's quite interesting. I go with b4, going with my plan. Queen a4 check, and here I missed. I missed king b6. which is wild. This is the best move and gives a small edge to the black pieces. This move, though, kind of steps on my own attack. I think you can see that it's not very pretty. On takes, I was scared of probably rook e1 with rook here. But the engine is saying that after takes here, I can go king a6, which I completely missed. And now rook e5 attacking this is met with an attacking queen b6 on this open file. And you can't take here because it's mate here after queen check, rook b2, and then the king goes up and it's completely over with queen d3 checkmate. So this counter is not possible. And so what does white do here? After rook e1, I take, you can go b3, and it's the only move, but it's wild that king b6 to go king a6 is actually a pretty interesting and good formula. It's really cool, and you can also do rook b5 things and stack the rooks because this rook will be non-player, NPC, non-player. I go and I play king c7, which is kind of logical. After takes, and then rook e5 here, I can just play f6. But after takes, and rook here, which I was seeing, then I had f6 things anyways, and you can't go rook e5 as well. So this was played, now I go f6, kick the rook e3, and here I play the only good move, the only slightly advantaged move for the black pieces. See if you can find it here in this position. There's a switch in mindset. You see, after queen a4 check, white have pretty much neutralized black's queenside attack. And you have to switch it up to willing to go into an endgame. And this space will be the main actor in your advantage in a king endgame if it comes to it. So queen d7 offering a queen trade, and if the white pieces decline immediately, then you can go like rook e8, try to get the file, and play on two fronts of the board, both with this attack and on this open e-file. If the queen trades, which is what was played in the game, I go king takes, and on rook e1, I'm right on time with rook e8. And this aims to trade the rooks. Now, this is quite equal. And you know, you guys, I was very, very scared during this entire game. I have to admit to you, playing an equal game with very low opportunities and dodging my opponent that is literally creating weaknesses on my position was very stressful. There's a lot of points on the line. If I lose, it's like minus 15. It's not happening. It's not an option. So I always had to calculate so much, and I did, but it came to like always, I'm fighting for equality every time. And it was so frustrating. So this king endgame, I looked in large and it was at least a draw for me. This space is very, very nice and I just really much liked it. My king is first to this side of the board, but most likely if white plays perfectly, it's a draw. After takes, my opponent goes rook d1, I go rook e8. My opponent does not trade rooks and plays f5, which was a very surprising yet interesting move. The plan is to go rook e6 and plant a rook on e6, and then go for my weak pawns with rook takes a5, or then rook a7, and then just go for my very, very fragile g7 pawn. How do I fight this? How do I fight this rook e6 infiltration that's coming onto the board? I go with takes. And it's interesting, okay, inaccuracy given by the engine, but I found it very interesting. If you can't take with the rook for obvious reasons, so it forces b takes. And now I can take the rook and play a4. And the idea is a little sneaky, is that my opponent goes with rook e6, right as you would. You want to infiltrate, you want to attack these weak pawns that are all over the place. I go a3, so I pushed I made these two pawn moves. Why? It's so weird, right? Why would I just push this pawn? It's not getting stronger by the day. It kind of is. Because you see the pawn on a3 now controls this b2 square, and now I can go with rook b8, rook b2 eventually. And I have like this little lever, this little nutty kind of square on the b2 that is really, really nice for this rook. Rook b6 is played, trying to assault here, rook b5 or rook b7 is threatened. I go king c7, it's forced. Now my opponent can absolutely take a draw here. Rook e6 threatening rook e7, king back, rook b6, threatening rook b7, and I think I have no response. I have to either play super passive with rook a7, trying to neutralize this, or I have to just shuffle my king. My opponent goes a little greedy here, and this is kind of what I was hoping that would happen, because you see, rook e6 is a slight margin. It's the only good move for the white pieces. It's the only good move. And if you don't play rook e6, it's a bad move. And that's what was played. Rook b4. My opponent misread that I have a super strong resource. And see if you can find it. I think you'll be very proud of yourself if you can see what I played here with the black pieces. This is a planning kind of chess problem, right? It's not like a tactical thing, but if you can plan this well for the black pieces, really gauge where this rook is going to try to take my pawn, you can be on the better side of things. Oh yeah, I play king c6 first. It's not good, but king c6 was to take up this, I think. The idea, everyone, is rook e8. So rook e8 to go rook e4 to then take g4. That is the plan. So king c6, I'm not sure. I think I wanted to avoid rook a7 things check down the line, so I didn't want to keep my king on c7. So all about maintaining this g7 pawn. So rook e8, rook a4, and I go rook e4. Now you take your pawn, your freebie, your outside passed pawn on a2. It's all good, it's all fun, but your rook is in front of your pawn, which is kind of stepping on toes here, whilst I can take this very, very weak g4 pawn, you move rook a7, and I can take this other pawn, gaining me a pawn up while still defending my weakness g7. And my entire kingside pawn structure is defended. Very, very solid. While I also have a outside passed pawn, but there's a small difference. And this is very instructional. This pawn is a runner. This pawn is extremely hard to stop because it's so far from the king and it's so far from the rook. The rook has to waste 2 moves if ever it wants to catch up to this pawn. And I don't have a rook in front of my passed pawn like the white pieces that is going to be so hard for the white pieces to progress. You're going to see in a while. So now, after a4, it's a pawn race. It's a pawn race. Rook a8, I go rook g5. Actually, winning on the spot here is h4. And I saw this, but I didn't love it. After h3, I don't know, I didn't love this. But I guess that the rook is chained to defending this pawn, and now we can just gallop with our king. But on king b6, king a5, there's always rook a8 check things, and then rook returning because my king would be forced back. So I think I didn't love those things. But here, how does black progress? It's a mystery. I don't think they do. So that's why h4 was the better move. I go rook g5. I get a little greedy, and it's a little slower, but I'm trying to win this pawn so I get all 3 passed pawns and really try to deliver a win here. This is based on my assumption that this pawn is never dangerous, but I missed this nice idea that my opponent played, rook b8. This was a little scary at first. The best move was like check, king here, check, and then king here, and then just like annoying my king. But then I can take here and defend. So that's what I had eventually. Anyways, my opponent goes rook b8, and this kind of like makes a wall between my king and the pawn here, the a pawn. And this scares me because the a pawn is now a runner. If I do nothing as black, that a pawn is scaling up the board and becoming dangerous. So I take here on f5, this is all calculated, king e2, and I go rook g5. And I'm threatening things, you know, along the lines of rook g2 check, and then rook a2. And I had seen this very, very pretty maneuver in which, and my opponent missed it, and this is why this is so key to this position. So here, upon taking f5, I'm taking a pawn and threatening to defend, and then I have 3 passed pawns. Defense is king e2, taking up f2. Now I go rook g5, defending my pawn, but then once again, threatening this to defend against this pawn. King f2 is forced, and now we have h4. The idea is that if you ever try to defend against my pawn, so like rook h8, let's say, then I can just defend here peacefully, and this pawn is not a danger anymore. a5, king b5, completely neutralized, GG's. So you don't. You actually race with your pawn. You go a5, and now I can go h3. And yes, this pawn looks dangerous, but no, it's not pushed up the board to be defended against. Because now on rook h8, my pawn is not pushed up the board to go here. It's not there for that. It's there for rook g2, to support the rook defending against these pawns, to take out completely white's counterplay, and then have two protected passed pawns in the endgame, completely winning, right? Just liquidating into a better endgame. You just want to transpose or liquidate into a better endgame. So that's what was played. I go h3, threatening rook g2. My opponent sees it, is kind of distraught, plays rook h8 here, and I go rook g2, king up, and then rook c2 first. Very, very nice detail. I didn't want to go rook a2. This is a more precise move. I'm threatening to take with check, and God forbid you take on h3. I go check, king up, and then we just trade into like bread and butter, super winning endgame. It's over. So my opponent is forced to play another king move, and now I can even defend my pawn while taking the c3 pawn. And then I have ample amounts of time to defend against this pawn here, and it's completely winning. Like I have 2 pawns up and soon 3 pawns up after a5 is dealt with. My opponent goes king f5, and then it's a matter of just preventing counterplay. I play king b5, stopping this pawn. My opponent's friend comes to the board. They ended their game, and he looks up to his friend, and he says, and he goes like this to the board. He goes, "It was completely drawn," and now he resigns. So I shake his hand. Very funny ending to that game. I win, but this was a very close call, I would say. Too close for comfort, but we get the win. The very main thing that I want you to grasp from this game is not the little details, is really the fact that I was patient. And patience at the chessboard is highly valued, and it's compensated. So whenever you're playing a weaker opponent, just be patient. Play out the game until they play a mistake. And if they don't, they played an exceptional game. And if they do make a mistake, then you grab your opportunity and seize the win. And that's exactly the technique I went for, and I'm glad it worked. Thank you so much for watching. My next game is the final round of this tournament. I am playing a candidates master from Poland who plays a feisty Lopez. See you next recap.